DMs of the entire world, years apart or years too close. What are your favorite dungeons that you've designed? Part 2. Have you ever played Resident Evil 1, the Spencer Mansion, by chance? I recreated that with Dungeons & Dragons, only expanding some of the hallways by 5 feet to allow for better combat. I filled the area up not with zombies, but rather with simic hybrids controlled by a fungus to better fit the lore of the story, and the creatures I called Chimerians, which were pretty much bioweapons spliced together with magic and DNA. Of course, many of the puzzles were bypassed through a Master of Unlocking, but it was still a lot of fun. They progressed through without a clue of the similarities until they reached a fountain, and drained it to reveal a staircase going down to where the final boss was. At this point, one of the players finally connected the dots and simply said, "I should have seen this coming when we found the repeater crossbow on the wall," a reference to the shotgun on the wall in Resident Evil that activated a crushing ceiling trap in a connected room. "Oh, you almost became a gibble sandwich." The dungeon itself wasn't good per se, as it was almost a carbon copy of Resident Evil 1, but I had removed the player's weapons and spell focuses before they entered, causing them to have to scavenge weapons that broke to represent ammo, spell components, healing items, and so on, making for an unnerving experience. So I'll keep this short and sweet because a lot of it is up to the improvisation of the DM and the creativity too. This is a futuristic tower which runs off high-quality, overpowered solar panels. The first floor is reception, floors 2 to 5 are offices, 5 to 10 are science labs, engineering labs, machine construction labs, creative a similar creature or two from Horizon Zero Dawn video game. There is an elevator which goes up to level 52, which is another office. This is where things get interesting. Every level from 11 to 51 is its own pocket dimension portal to a space outside somewhere. Inside an ocean, a level with floating earth and low gravity, a level that looks like 1920s Venice, with the exception that everything isn't yellow, is black and white. In the underground section of the castle, Basement 1 is a car park or something of the like. Basement 2 is a tunnel that is covered in explosive glyphs that trigger if someone is writing 5 feet proximity of it. At the end of the tunnel, it goes into a dungeon that acts like one of the towers from the Ruins of Greyhawk campaign module in AD&D 2nd edition. However, the first room you are met with a Night Stalker, a creature from the Shadowfell. I have a dungeon that I haven't fleshed out each individual room yet, but the concept is one of the coolest I've come up with. You walk into an obsidian room with barrels in one corner, smashed crates in another, and rats scurrying around the room. There are scratches on the wall, and in front of you is a door. Simple enough, right? Well, here's where it gets interesting. There are 10 rooms in total, including the room you start in. Each room has a similar layout, a 30 by 30-ish room, black stone walls, just varying in decoration. However, when each player walks through the door, you are randomly teleported to another room within the dungeon. Here's how it works in-game. Each door has a teleportation rune carved on the top of every door. The boss in the dungeon is a Fae, who relies on illusions and trickery. He had runes specifically carved to split up massive parties from attacking him. The runes can be detected and dispelled, although they are a harder DC than your basic dispel magic. Now here's how it works out of game. The DM rolls a d10. Whatever rolls on the dice is the room you get teleported to. Each player can end up in a different room depending on where you go. It is meant to confuse the players and see what they can do on their own. Right now I have the entrance room, a kitchen, a bedroom, and a storage room. Plus the last room is the boss room. I recently finished designing a dungeon which I'm about to start running a campaign in. It's a 12-floor dungeon. Characters will start at level 1 and progress to level 6 by the end. It's set up with some things specific to my world, but it could be adapted to any setting. Now the current setup is this. The year is 800 PG, or post-governance. The date is Dune 1, the first day of the year in a new century. To celebrate the new century, the yearly New Year festivities, which generally include trials of strength and such, have been expanded. 20 people have sponsored 20 teams of 4 to explore this dungeon, which was created specifically for this event. Now, the dungeon is not intended to be overly difficult. The idea is to give commoners a chance to achieve greatness by winning the competition. For the entire year prior, there have been advertisements for this new Century Dungeon Expedition event, touting it as a way for people to reach their true potential, etc. Anyone can participate, so long as they're not already an experienced adventurer. This whole concept is that this is a new start for a new century. The teams are chosen by the sponsors in a draft format after having watched the competitors for a week in various trials. Each team will have 30 days to complete the dungeon, whereas the first team to do so will win. The wrinkle is thus: once you get teleported to the dungeon entrance, you can't come back. There are only 4 ways to leave. 1. You finish the dungeon first. 2. Another team finishes the dungeon first. 3. Nobody finishes the dungeon within 30 days. And 4. You or a member of your party dies. The 20 groups will be entering the dungeon together, but there's a little twist in the magic of the dungeon. While there are truly 20 groups in the dungeon at any given time, there are actually 20 instances of the dungeon itself, so you'll never actually encounter another party while in the dungeon. You'll only ever encounter them on the surface, which is a neutral zone where parties can return and camp safely. Also, like in Hunger Games, there are scrying orbs all throughout the dungeon that let people watch the events, and sponsors can send in gifts to help their team once they've reached certain checkpoints. As this is supposed to be a celebratory event, and not actually intended to cause harm, there's a special provision for characters who die. Each character who enters the dungeon is given 1 free resurrection, with the understanding that they are not allowed to continue if they use the free resurrection. If a character dies in the dungeon, they are instantly teleported out and revived, and they're considered to be retired at that point. If they want to go back down again, they can negotiate with their sponsor to see if the sponsor will pay their resurrection fee, and potentially be in debt to the sponsor afterwards, but the hope is that the reward at the end of the dungeon will be worth the cost. Now, assuming the resurrection fee is paid, the member is sent back into the dungeon. Subsequent resurrections must be paid for by the member or the sponsor. If the character decides not to return to the dungeon or their sponsor won't pay for their resurrection fee, the next available character on the list, as in the player's new character, is teleported into the dungeon with a special coin. The party is then given a choice. If they wish to accept the new member into their party, the new member can use the magic of the coin to be brought up to an appropriate level of competency to match up with the other members. If instead the party decides, "No, we don't want to do this anymore, we've had enough," they can take the coin and use its magic to teleport all of them back out of the dungeon. The parties do get to keep all the treasure they find in the dungeon minus the sponsorship fees. After all, the sponsors are playing too. The first party to reach the exit receives a key to a golden chest which contains unknown riches that are randomly determined when the chest is opened, be they magic items, art, or actual money. So I run my campaign on an island called Morningstar. In the center of the island is a mountain range with a massive cave system in it. My players just entered the cave system in the biggest mountain range. Instead of going with the traditional dungeon format, I decided to make a branching cave system with multiple dungeons. There's a crazed wizard's laboratory keep that a beholder has taken over. The beholder uses the dead mage's corpse as a puppet. There's a frozen pit of water that leads to an ancient ice toad's lair. He holds the key to the mage's keep. There's a cave full of massive cockroaches and a horrific beast. I haven't decided what monster I want to use there yet. There's a myconid colony that is in the middle of their spore ritual. That's bad. A set of long black stairs that descends into a corrupted fire djinn's forge, where a weapon to kill one of the big bads is held. A village of kobolds, a badger man druid who wants the party to bring him some myconoid heads for a stew, and a deep gnome village that's being besieged by strange monsters coming from somewhere within the cave system. The party is there to help the gnomes, but they have to find out where the monsters are coming from. Now the monsters are coming from a cult that has made their home in the caverns and opened up a pit to hell. The party has 8 days to stop the cult from summoning a badass demon, and in next session, they start day 3. I can't wait to see what happens. Me neither, so if you're listening in, let us know. My favorite here, let me do some air quotes for you, dungeon, quote, quote, is a small abandoned town. Essentially, players enter the town and need to decide whether or not to save this person who is being burned as a witch. Now, usually players save the person, of course. This angers the corrupted chaplain, who sends waves after waves of mercenary soldiers to attack this city while the players defend. Players get really creative since I give them time between waves of enemies to set traps and think of alternatives to combat. I have an experimental dungeon I designed as a part of a patchwork world made from multiple different realms, both homebrew and canon. In it, you can find random animals and creatures. You can also find hints of younger versions of other characters, a very confused Strahd, a very angry Vecna, a bunch of crystals that turned an entire race of people into reality-bending gods, a rampaging elephant. Why is that there? A hungry little fluffy white rabbit and a horde of goblins. It can't be complete without a horde of goblins. In that dungeon, Strahd joined the party as an ally NPC against Vecna. And the end of the dungeon has both Strahd and Vecna wielding the crystals to become temporary gods as they fought one another. The PC characters had to help Strahd win and destroy Vecna while avoiding being obliterated by the whirlwind of divine energy. After the party left, they were treated by seeing Strahd wearing a unicorn cloak with little rainbow designs on it, walking around in broad daylight. I'm a pretty vampire boy, hello! This wasn't Barovia anymore, and Strahd can go wherever he pleased. Here's the picture, hold on, I need to see this picture before I lose my mind. Okay, I really hope that the editor will put the picture up because I'm looking at it. This is the coolest frickin' thing I've ever seen that Strahd has ever been depicted wearing. Yes, it's fluffy and goofy. It's Strahd, a pale-faced vampire in a black cloak underneath literally a gigantic Snuggie, covered in rainbows and clouds with a unicorn horn on its head with the sun setting in the distance or rising in the distance. And let me tell you, this is so cute and cool and I love it and I need more of it. Hey everybody, Brian Von VA checking in after the vid. Make sure to leave a like, subscribe, ring that bell, and let us know in the comments below what your favorite dungeon was that you've created or that you've actually seen someone create. We love you all. Please be safe, be happy, and make sure to stay hydrated. Love you all. Toodaloo.